Welcome to The Story. I'm Tim Gordon in for Blair Best tonight. You know, one of the biggest issues that viewers email us about are your power bills. Up they go. And next year, they're going up again. Oregon regulators approved a 5.5% rate hike for residential PGE customers today, just one day after approving a rate hike of nearly 10% for residential Pacific Power customers. Evan Watson spoke to one of those state regulators today to try and understand the reasoning behind these seemingly endless hikes.
Oregon regulators will allow PGE and Pacific Power to raise their rates again to offset growing energy demand across the state.
We spent just an enormous amount of time digging into the details and understanding where reliability and safety were at risk and where something could be cut.
Starting in January, PGE will raise its residential power rates by 5.5%. Pacific Power's rate for residential customers is going up 9.8%. State regulators with the Public Utility Commission acknowledge that's a big deal for a lot of people.
We know all rate increases are really challenging for households. There's no getting around that.
As many consumers know, power costs are surging year after year. Including these latest rate hikes, within the last 4 years, PGE residential rates have increased by 49.3%. Pacific Power residential rates have gone up by 45%. Northwest Natural, too, a 42.7% increase. Regulators say these increases are needed to pay for capital investments in transmission, power generation, and infrastructure. They're also needed to pay for costs connected to wildfires across the state. Regulators adding that utilities have to be safe and reliable.
Preparing for or replacing equipment after a wildfire increases cost. It all comes together to really put a lot of pressure on the bill.
But consumer advocate groups like the Oregon Citizens Utility Board, or CUB, are critical of regulators' decisions to allow significant rate hikes year after year, saying it's creating an energy affordability crisis. Still, regulators say they're putting checks on the big companies, adding requirements for shareholders to share in expenses, and declining cost of equity raises.
We know rate increases are really hard, and these increases prevent larger challenges, larger increases in the future.
Earlier this year, the CUB asked regulators to cap any future utility rate increases at 7% plus inflation. Regulators rejected this proposal, saying it would be too difficult to implement. Regulators say if you're having trouble paying a power bill, reach out to your utility company. You could be eligible for bill discount programs. Evan Watson, reporting for KGW News.
In St. Helens, 10 school district employees are on leave in connection with a sex abuse scandal that has seen teachers arrested, investigations by the Department of Human Services, even a high school principal facing charges. Today we learned the names of the 10 people on leave. Many are staff from elementary, middle, and high schools across the district. 5 of the employees on leave are teachers. 3 people are being criminally charged, and police say 1 more teacher is under criminal investigation. Thomas Schultz has been following all the developments out in St. Helens. And Thomas, you heard from students in the district today. What did they say about the teachers who are on leave? And also, this has got to be so tough on them. How are they feeling?
Yeah, Tim, I mean, the past month has been really hard on them, and they say, frankly, for those teachers that have now been placed on leave, they're not surprised by any of this. A lot of the students that we spoke to today say that they've heard rumors for quite some time, whether in high school or dating all the way back to middle school, of these teachers and maybe some interesting or odd situations involving them, so not at all surprising. Though there is a glimmer of hope here in St. Helens. There's a new principal taking over for Katie Wagner, who is now facing criminal charges. Dr. Charlotte Ellis is the new principal. And students tell us that under her guidance, it's been a complete shift here at St. Helens, a much more positive environment and a place where teachers and administrators are not only enforcing the rules, but checking on students consistently to make sure that their mental health is up to where it should be.
All right, it's nice to hear that bit at least. You know, we hear all the time, Thomas, about schools dealing with these strapped budgets. All this certainly can't help in this situation. How much is this going to cost the district?
Yeah, well, Tim, it's going to be hefty. Right now, the district, it's going to cost them almost $200,000, and that's probably going to rise because $127,000 of those dollars is being spent on those employees who are currently on paid administrative leave, either on their salary or their benefits. Another $64,000 is being used on those replacement workers to replace them while this whole situation is underway. And of course, we all hear about issues across Oregon facing school districts, both big and small. Just last year, Portland Public Schools, the biggest district in the state, underwent pretty hefty financial constraints. You have to imagine $200,000 for an issue like this is a tough strain for a small school district up here in St. Helens. Tim?
Yeah, for sure, and it's not over yet. Thomas Schultz in St. Helens tonight. Thomas, thanks a lot. Well, the situation in St. Helens has, for good reason, gotten a lot of attention lately, but child abuse in schools happens all over. A reporter at Oregon Public Broadcasting decided to look into how widespread it is in Oregon and Washington, and we think her coverage is worth your time. Education reporter Natalie Pate looked into reports of sexual misconduct in schools, and she found that about 1 in 10 students across the country will experience some form of sexual misconduct at the hands of an educator by the time they graduate high school. The news outlet Business Insider looked at records from across the country, and OPB analyzed records from the 10 largest public school districts in Oregon and Washington from 2017 to 2022. They found that in Oregon and Washington, about 2 kids per classroom will experience some kind of sexual misconduct before graduating. We talked with Pate today about what she learned.
So sexual misconduct by educators ranges from inappropriate comments and nude photographs, all the way up to grooming, harassment, and rape. Most participants in a recent nationwide study experienced the lower end of that, the crude comments. And that isn't to at all diminish that experience, but the vast majority was on that end of things. In the documents from Washington and Oregon, we also saw a very large range. There were examples of whispering in young girls' ears, touching their hair, watching porn in the classroom, sending photos of genitals, convincing teen boys and girls to come to their homes and have sex with them or with other people, and performing sex on having sex in the classroom. So it's definitely, some of the examples were far more graphic, and it definitely has a wide range.
Well, Pate says that 10% number nationally is likely an undercount. In fact, she talked with someone working with teens who reported concerning things. And when that person tried to report it, no one took the claim seriously.
There are going to be times when students say something or rumors spread. Those things do happen. However, advocates have really stressed that, if a student expresses a concern, no matter how small it may be, that could be the tip of the iceberg. That could be a red flag. That is something to pay attention to. I definitely heard from people who I interviewed from the story, school employees feeling like they were taking it seriously, but the people they reported up to didn't, or some of their coworkers didn't believe the students' concerns.
Well, if you want to check out the full article, it's posted right now over at opb.org. Well, today we learned Oregon lost a legend in the field of cardiovascular medicine. Dr. Albert Starr saved hundreds of thousands of lives with an artificial heart valve that he helped invent in the late 1950s. Starr died earlier this month at the age of 98 due to complications following a recent surgery. Starr arrived at OHSU nearly 70 years ago. And our team went into the KGW vault and found a profile from 2015 with footage of Starr stretching back to the early days of KGW broadcasting in Portland. Tracy Berry brings us the story.
First, some history. This film from our archives shows a breathtaking moment in 1958. Dr. Starr performing open-heart surgery on a child.
It was on a 7-year-old girl?
Yes, Martha Van Cleve.
You remember?
Oh, yeah.
It was proclaimed the first in Oregon, but it wasn't. Heart surgery was a risky business in the 50s, so it was just the first one they told us about.
By then we were confident enough that we were not jeopardizing her in any way by filming the operation.
It was just a couple of years later that Dr. Starr and Miles Lowell Edwards would invent a desperately needed artificial heart valve. John Peterson was one of the first patients to get the experimental valve. This is footage from 1971, the 10th anniversary of his surgery. Peterson and Dr. Starr both knew it should work, but it might not.
While we were confident that it would be a successful operation, there was no way we had to be absolutely certain of that.
They said it was a risky operation. How did you feel about that?
It was a risky operation, but I didn't have any choice. And that's the way I felt about it.
Myron?
I'm Myron.
Yeah, how are you?
And I'm very honored to see you and talk to you.
Yeah.
You saved my life.
By 1974, the operation was more routine, but Myron Wurzer didn't have much of a choice either. After 2 bouts of rheumatic fever as a child, by 26, his aortic valve was shot.
And it's been working good ever since.
This was his first visit with Dr. Starr since that operation 40 years ago. Myron still carries a card with his valve's model number.
Do you happen to remember what kind of metal?
Yes, it's called Stellite 21, which is a chromium alloy.
The valve still working great in Myron's heart. A heart swelled with gratitude for the doctor.
Now that I've met him, I think he's the coolest person that ever walked this earth. I mean, he's so amazing.
And actually, when you start adding up all the operations,
I figure about 7,000 or 8,000 people are above ground because they had the surgery with my own fingers.
plus the other heart doctors Starr trained in their patients, plus the some 250,000 people who got the valve, it is pretty amazing.
When you think about it, I'm married and I've got kids and now I've got grandkids and I wouldn't be around. That's mind-boggling.
And while this new award and all the old ones are appreciated, Dr. Starr says that, my friends, is what really matters.
So that's a tremendous reward for your work, to see happy people that you have operated on and know that they wouldn't be alive if they didn't have that surgery.
What an amazing life and legacy. Starr is survived by his wife, 2 sons, and 3 grandchildren, and we wish them all well, and may Dr. Starr rest in peace. Up next on The Story, an in-depth one-on-one interview with Washington's Governor-elect Bob Ferguson, the collection of political history he's bringing to the governor's mansion, as well as the immediate challenges he'll have to deal with and issues he anticipates in the months and years to come. That's all next when The Story returns. Welcome back. Well, the new year will usher in a new political landscape, both nationally and in the state of Washington. Bob Ferguson is transitioning from the Attorney General's office into the governor's mansion, facing a multi-billion-dollar deficit, talk of new taxes, a crisis in education, and the next Trump administration. Tonight, the governor-elect goes on the record with Joyce Taylor, sharing what he anticipates in the months ahead and his passion that blends politics with state history.
Scoop Jackson, yeah, absolutely. That's when he's first running for the U.S. Senate. This guy, Samuel Cosgrove, he's like the holy grail to find his autograph. Yeah, so this is just one of many books of political buttons. So this was, so it's a couple Washington candidates and Teddy Roosevelt. So yeah, so these ribbons are, there's Governor Meade was a governor in Washington State. John Wilson was a senator. It's amazing how much I could find, and I learned a ton about the office through just acquiring these different items.
Tell us about this.
It's 1889, which is the year we became a state. So moved from being a territory to a state. And Elijah Ferry, he'd been a territorial governor, but now he was also elected as our first governor as a state. What's especially great about it is it's actually signed by Elijah Ferry. I like reading history books, of course, but this is, for me, in some ways, a more interesting way to learn about history.
What will you add to the collection, I wonder?
We'll have to see. We'll have to see, yeah.
What does it mean to you to become part of Washington history?
I don't really think of it that way, but you sort of realize in collecting these things of, hey, the evolution over time from as a territory to becoming a state and the different issues the state has faced and how different governors grappled with those.
You're coming into office just as the Trump administration's going back to the White House. What are you anticipating?
We have spent time preparing as an Attorney General now, as an office, for the new administration based on what they put on paper with Project 2025 to make sure if he acts on those things in a way that we think is unconstitutional and exceeds his authority, that harms Washingtonians, well then of course it's our duty really to act.
We've heard a lot of talk about mass deportation, even discussions around whether or not the new administration would use the National Guard. How might something like that impact Washington State?
We are spending a fair amount of time researching what powers a president has to essentially federalize the National Guard, and when the president does not have that authority.
You are the governor of a blue state in a country that's becoming more red than blue.
Yeah, I don't really think of Washington as a blue state, right? I'm mindful that while I won a good victory, 44% of the people voted for Dave Reichert. That's not a small number, right? My job is to be a good governor for all Washingtonians. That's important. That's my focus.
Which brings us to the budget.
Yeah.
The state over the next 4 years is going to be facing like $14 billion deficit. How will you tackle that?
I think it's important to make sure that when you have a budget crisis, that as a state, we are being as lean and efficient as possible. The reason why the King County Council now has 9 council members, not 13, is I was the only Democrat to vote with the Republicans to reduce the size of the number of elected officials.
The Senate Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, told our Drew Mickelson that they're looking at potentially new taxes, maybe a wealth tax or property tax.
I think before anyone has a conversation about that, I think it's important that we, as elected officials, communicate clearly to the people that we're taking a tough internal look at our budget, right? And what savings can we achieve there?
When you look at the recent election, the rejection of the initiatives that would have rolled back taxes, the leadership in Olympia says it suggests that people are okay with taxes. Do you agree with that?
I think what it shows is that if elected officials are thoughtful about what revenue they're proposing, and if it's not adversely impacting hardworking, middle-class Washingtonians, then the overwhelming majority of Washingtonians are open to that.
The current funding model for public education has been described as inequitable and completely outdated. Will that be something that you address, even look at reforming?
I'm concerned about many things related to education, including the fact that the percentage of our budget that goes to K through 12 education has, as you know, gone down in recent years. That's the wrong direction, right? The number of special needs kids we have in our system has gone up. The mental health issues we have in classrooms all across the state, those needs have gone up. So we need a greater investment. So the way we invest, how we invest, the percentage we invest, all those need to be on the table. So I find these super interesting to research these names.
A lot of people may not know that when you're not working, which is almost all of the time, or involved with family matters, you are collecting.
Yes. You know how hobbies are. It starts small, and next thing you know it's taken over on a certain level. And that, I'm guilty of that for sure.
Tell us a little bit about your collection.
I guess I'd say political memorabilia, autographs, buttons, ribbons, you name it, with a particular focus on Washington State.
Tell us about this one.
Yeah, no, this is a great one. What's great about this book is it was the personal copy of Wing Luke. Wing Luke, of course, we have the Wing Luke Museum. Wing Luke was the first Asian American elected to any political office in the Northwest. He's a real hero of mine. I named my Civil Rights Division after Wing Luke many years ago, and incredibly, it was his personal copy. It's signed by him, and when you go through it, he's
Looks
got...
like it was used.
Oh man, I mean, he's got handwritten notes, which is incredible, and every page, and I've left it exactly as it was. And as a lawyer, right, to have his copy, that he obviously kept, it's kind of amazing that we have it. Yeah. Yes, that's one of my favorites for sure. So this is a trip that Kennedy took to Seattle. And I think this is the trip where he spoke at the University of Washington convocation. Magnuson and Jackson signed this item. So, anytime a president's visiting Washington State, it's not that often, especially back in the day, but to have our two most iconic political figures, arguably in state history, sign that document with John Kennedy is one that's pretty cool. You sort of realize in collecting these things of the evolution over time from as a territory to becoming a state and the different issues the state has faced and how different governors grappled with those, successfully or not so successfully. You sort of realize there's a baton that's being handed, down the line, and whatever you think of their politics, I think they're examples of what we've been blessed to have in Washington State. So obviously I'm hoping to continue that in my role as governor.
Interesting profile, a lot of history there too. So Ferguson takes office on January 15th, but he's not going to be moving to the state capitol in Olympia full time. With two high schoolers and a wife with her own professional career, the family's going to keep their home in Seattle. Ferguson is planning to share much of his collection with the public, setting up an exhibit in the governor's mansion for visitors wanting to learn about Washington's political history. Well, up next on the story, you may have heard this week that the so-called murder hornet has been eradicated from the U.S. But tonight, we're getting insight into the unique way experts tracked down the nests and took out the queens, how one hornet's loyalty ended up betraying its own kind, when the story returns. The so-called murder hornet has been eradicated from the U.S. The invasive insect that is the world's largest hornet was spotted in Washington state near the Canadian border back in 2019, but it hasn't been found on U.S. soil since 2021. Washington was the only state that had confirmed reports. Trappers found 4 nests between 2020 and 21. The hornets, which can grow to 2 inches long, posed a major threat to pollinators and native insects as they could wipe out a honeybee hive in less than 90 minutes, decapitating the bees and then defending the hive as their own. They could sting through most beekeeper suits too, delivering nearly 7 times the amount of venom as a honeybee. Ouch, with the ability to sting multiple times. So yeah, thankfully they're gone. At one point, the Washington Agriculture Department ordered special reinforced suits from China to protect themselves from those stings.
I've been doing this for over 25 years now, and it is a rare day when the humans actually get to win one against the insects. A small population of hornets that was trying to establish here really couldn't do it in secret. Every time a hornet was flying around and visiting somebody's window, we seemed to get a call about it. We even got a call about one visiting somebody's doorbell cam. And, that helped direct us to the nests and take them out.
So get this, one of the ways they found those nests was catching a live hornet and attaching a tiny radio tracking tag to that hornet using dental floss. When it returned to the nest, experts were close behind to destroy it.
I would like to say we had a little luck from the weather, a little luck from genetics, but most of all, we had a lot of tenacity from the population up there calling in reports, and our crews going out and working really hard to try to find every possible nest to get rid of it.
Yeah, so good riddance to them. But not to you, certainly, although this is the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And because of the holiday next week, the story will not be airing, but the team will be back with you the following Monday, December 30th, and I sure hope you'll join them. Have a wonderful holiday next week, however you celebrate, and have a great night.